Welcome back. This is Newsfeed, the Women's Day edition. Thank you for joining us now. Hundreds of undocumented foreign nationals were arrested in Johannesburg this week during a citywide operation by law enforcement agencies. Several illegal firearms and counterfeit goods were confiscated during the raid. Many now face the prospect of deportation. The Home Affairs Portfolio Committee welcomed the arrests, saying migration must happen within the framework of international and national law. Joining me now in studio to discuss some of these issues is the Minister of Home Affairs, Aaron Motsoaledi. Dr. Motsoaledi, thank you so much for coming through. So what we saw is an operation, a massive operation in the Joburg CBD. In fact, in the last 2 weeks, there have been several operations in the CBD, but all across Gauteng, there's this operation they call Operation Ukai Molao. So with the police announcing that among the people that they've been, targeting are undocumented foreign nationals who are in the country, and also linking that to some of the ills that they're saying they're trying to address, for instance, the trade in goods that are counterfeit in the city centers such as Johannesburg. What is your understanding of how what is happening now fits in with national policy?
Good afternoon, Thulasizwe, and good afternoon to the viewers up there. No, indeed, look, sometimes people confuse the issues of foreign nationals with criminality or the law. Our position is very clear, and it's like that in any country. When you commit a crime, law enforcement agencies must act. It shouldn't matter who you are or where you come from, because all must be equal before the law. So crime is crime, and I'm sure maybe it might be for quite a long time South Africa never acted on crime. And people are starting to believe it's our second nature, and when action is taken, they get surprised, they believe we're going against the law. It has to happen. For instance, can you just get out of here now, Thulasizwe, and go and open a business? Anyway, can you just do that? Isn't that everywhere in the world, anybody who must open a business, there must be processes, there must be processed, there must be given a license, there must be given a permit. The municipality must apply certain bylaws which always get applied. I'm sure even here, this is a new studio, isn't it? I'm sure to come here, you didn't just find a building and got equipment and came in. You followed certain processes and procedures, and you got licensed, and you are here correctly. The municipality knows about you. All other departments which are relevant to what you're doing here, they know about you. And that must happen to every human being in the country.
But you will face a question that says, what has happened now? Because it's been like that for a number of years, that people have been opening businesses without necessarily being documented and being licensed. And someone will say, actually, you're not as vigorous in your enforcement of those requirements when it comes to South Africans, yet you want to be vigorous now when foreign nationals are concerned.
Well, show me a South African who has done that. In fact, what I hear is that South Africans find it very difficult to open spaza shops, etc. For the simple reason that they are documented. We have got their IDs, we have got their fingerprints, we have got everything on them. If it was not happening, even with South Africans, then it was grievously wrong. And we can't say because something is wrong, we must continue perpetuating it because it's wrong. And I personally think that action that took place must continue, not only in Central Joburg, all over. Because I'm repeating, crime is crime is crime. You know, 2 weeks after I got into the Department of Home Affairs, I was invited by the Minister of Police, Minister Cele, to Yeoville, where there were problems. They wrote a petition to the minister. And that hall was full, and people were speaking one by one. Each one of them stand up and said, look, I'm not xenophobic. All I'm asking you ministers is that I want to live in a country with laws. Where are the laws of the country? And they told us lots of transgressions which were happening in that area called Yeoville. Transgressions, and whether the transgression is done by a South African or a non-South African, it still remains a transaction. It still remains wrong, and something must happen, you know. So that's what people were asking for. They were saying, please apply the laws of the country. Then we had this problem of truck drivers in Durban. That one, I was just about 3 days in the department when we went there. You know, this truck we met the truck drivers who were doing this. We met the truck owners, and we were 4 ministers.
I remember that.
Yes, you remember that. Now, we told the truck drivers who were banning the trucks that do they know that that's criminal? It's not allowed. Many of them said, yeah, we know, and we know it's wrong. So why are you doing it? And when they talk, and I'm not justifying their action because it's wrong, I start by saying it was criminal. But when they talk, you realize that certain laws which already exist in the country were not being obeyed by several authorities, you know, starting with Home Affairs itself, then the Department of Labor, then the municipalities, then trade and industry. If those laws were just applied as they are, without fear and favor, some of the things could not have happened.
So, taking your point then about crime being crime, no matter who commits it, and the law needing to be enforced, and people being regularized in terms of how they conduct business, etc. What's your sense, though, of the language used in communicating some of these operations? Because there's a critique that says it's almost as if, you know, in the communication at least, the officials that are at the forefront of these operations seem to juxtapose being undocumented in South Africa with criminality. So, you know, for instance, an operation targeting counterfeit goods, which everyone agrees, we don't need those in the country. They're not good for our economy.
It's not only a crime, by the way.
Within that,
that's economic sabotage.
Sentence. Yes.
That is economic sabotage.
No one debating that.
Yes.
But people are questioning whether it's wise to frame it in such a way that it appears as if this, you know, is happening because we have so many foreign nationals.
Well, if they found that the people who are doing that mostly are foreign nationals, what's wrong in saying so? The people who were arrested there were 659, right? They are at Central, the Central Johannesburg prison, the one we used to call John Foster Square. You know, that ugly John Foster Square, Central Johannesburg prison. There are 659 people there who have been arrested and been taken there, found having committed several of what are called crimes during the raid on Thursday. Out of that 659, 487 are undocumented foreign nationals, you know. 117 were found to be foreign nationals, but with some form of documentation, you know, either a passport or a permit, you know, asylum permit. You know, asylum permit gives you between 3 and 6 months, or having refugee status, you know, which is a recognized status internationally. And then 45 were found to be having documents which Home Affairs officials could not vouch for. And they've been called to come on Monday to Home Affairs in order to authenticate those documents. They couldn't vouch for them. They didn't know whether they are, you know, fraudulent documents or not, but they are giving them the benefit of the doubt. So from those numbers, you make your own judgment.
I'm disturbed a bit by what you just said, Minister, I must tell you. For starters, you're saying they are at Johannesburg Central Police Station. Doesn't the law say they need to be detained in a detention center, not necessarily in a kind of prison setup, but also this is an operation that happened, I believe, on Wednesday this week, and today we are on Friday.
Yes.
48 hours. What about that 48-hour requirement?
No, wait a bit. Thulasizwe, you see, this is why people confuse things. That operation was not directed at foreign nationals. It was directed at criminality. People were arrested there as having committed crimes and taken to John Foster Square because of the crimes. They were found with guns. They were found with counterfeit goods. They were found in areas where they are not supposed to be or they are not allowed, etc. So when they were taken there, they were taken to John Foster Square as having committed crimes. There they started taking fingerprints and processing them. And when you process them, it's then that you discover these things I'm telling you about.
Right.
That actually this one is undocumented. And you direct them the correct, what you call, it's true that when you arrest a person for an offense of being undocumented migrant, they must appear in court in 48 hours. And we have calculated about the events that took place there. That 48 hours expires on Monday because it doesn't count public holidays.
Weekend, yeah.
Even public holidays, it stops.
But what about their detention? Because that's also meant
No,
that once you realize that these are foreign nationals who are not documented, they're not to be kept like people who are detained for
Once you
crimes.
decide that this is a foreign national, now I'm detaining them for being undocumented, you start following you start following the law, which is not like you have arrested the criminal. You start following the laws of migration, which are there and very clear. The Refugee Act, in other words, you start applying the Refugee Act, which says this person must appear in front of a magistrate within 48 hours. As I'm talking, there are prosecutors there from the Department of Justice, 20 of them, processing this and making sure that they abide by the law. We do abide by the law, by the way, because you are the state, you are the government. We won't work against the law, I can promise you that.
What's the number that you cited there, Minister? You said you had 659 people arrested. How many of those have you categorized as being those with issues with their documentation?
45. They are not sure. They saw their document. They are not sure what they mean. They are going to authenticate them in the office on Monday. They've been asked to come, and if they are genuine, they will come. Right. If they don't come, they run away, then we'll start knowing there's something, but we have got clues of where we find them. Then 117 were found to be having some form of document or the other, and they were released, by the way. They are being released. The rest, I think, is 487, if I'm not mistaken. I can't do that mathematics very fast.
Over 400.
Were found to be undocumented, and they have to go through these processes.
All right, Minister, I want to take a quick break and pause our conversation, and then we'll continue because I want us to go into the space of issues to do with deportation, how we deal with those. That's Minister Aaron Motsoaledi, who's joining me. We're talking all things migration and the status of foreign nationals, documented and undocumented, and how government is dealing with the situation currently. Don't go anywhere. We continue this conversation in just a moment. Welcome back. This is Newsfeed. We are in conversation with Minister Aaron Motsoaledi about issues to do with immigration and documentation of foreign nationals in South Africa. Minister, so what we've seen as part of this operation, would you compare it to a previous operation that was called Operation Fiela, which really was about targeting illegal activities, and it involved multiple departments and agencies, cracking down on acts of criminality, but actually had a key element which was about immigration enforcement and led to a number of deportations?
Before answering that, it has been brought to my attention that I kept on saying John Foster Square. I want to apologize profusely.
I forgive you.
Maybe selling my age. I'm of
Absolutely.
I'm of the 1970s. I am of the 1976.
Johannesburg Central.
It's Johannesburg Central. Yes. But you remember in 1976, the name John Foster Square, when it's mentioned, you start running away even before knowing what which you have done wrong. Anyway, let me apologize for that once more. Look, I read about Operation Fiela. I was not involved because I was in the social cluster. It was an operation carried on by the people in the security cluster, meaning justice, home affairs, police, etc. But I think it's more or less the same thing because that Operation Fiela was targeting criminal activity and wrongdoing in several areas of the country. And I think this is more or less the same thing.
Leads me to the question then about the status of deportations. I was looking at a document from the news organization that is Africa Check, and it was talking about the numbers in as far as deportations are concerned. I mean, it goes all the way back to around 2001, where it records, according to the Home Affairs annual reports, 156,000 deportations, fluctuating from time to time, with the result that it seems deportations peaked at about 280,000 between 2008 and 2009, before dropping drastically and really dramatically, with the result that by about 2010 to 2011, we were talking about 55,000 deportations a year. So it seems we were taking a different direction in as far as deportations are concerned. Where do we stand now? Are we going to escalate and have more deportations of people from this country?
Well, Thulasizwe, in the past 5 years, the government spent close to 1 billion rand on deportations. And if I'm not mistaken, it will have deported about 150,000 people. These are the figures I'm giving you, which are in those reports, by the way, will be figures of those who are deported through Lindela, the deportation center. There are other deportations that are happening on a daily basis, especially if Home Affairs officials are around Musina and they found somebody who has just skipped the border illegally 5 minutes ago. I mean, they are able to find authorities on that side and negotiate those who are not counting. Yes, it is true that the deportations won't be as many as it used to be in the past because of some of the laws, the new laws that have been passed. For instance, by the Constitutional Court, this issue of 48 hours, meaning if you can't find, if you are not able to do your processes within 48 hours, then you can't deport anybody, you release them. But you also know it's not Home Affairs officials that take a decision that they deport. It actually has to be a judicial officer. After arresting these people, they must appear in front of a magistrate who will then rule that the person is deported or not. So that is a very lengthy process. I'm sure you are aware there's a backlog in the legal system of the country. So there is clearly a backlog, yes, that's true.
And you have an inspectorate that deals with this particular aspect of your work, this immigration inspectorate, but directly involved with issues of deportation. What are the capacity issues there? Because it seems there's a challenge there, including a financial capacity challenge, but also a personnel capacity challenge.
The biggest challenge is a personnel capacity, because we have got, Home Affairs have got 800 immigration inspectors around the whole country. That's a very small number. And you are aware that when you go to Treasury and say, I want to increase them, the answer will become obvious, that the compensation for employees has hit the ceiling. You are aware that South Africa's compensation for employees is 35% of the total budget, and there's some form of moratorium on hiring, yes. So it does affect us. It's a very small number. Take, for instance, SAPS, South African Police Service. They've got 700 policemen and women at OR Tambo Airport. It's a port of entry. One of the 11 ports of entry that are through the air is OR Tambo. It's the biggest. It has got 700 police dealing with immigration issues only, just in one port of entry. Compare that to the whole inspectorate having 800 people. You understand why I say it's a very serious challenge.
And that's not the only challenge.
If they could open, if there could be an opening that there's no more moratorium, yeah, of course we'll move very swiftly.
And by the way, you use the word moratorium. It's not like it's been announced by the finance minister that there is, but it's effectively a moratorium on increasing the size of the public service, right?
No, it is there.
Yeah.
It is there, and I kept on reminding people because they confused them. When the moratorium was launched, the then Minister of Finance, Minister Bravin, I think it was a last budget speech before he left the department, said in Parliament during the budget speech that the moratorium does not affect cold phase of delivery, meaning teachers, nurses, doctors, etc. If they are not being hired, it's for another reason, not because there's a moratorium. But it affected other departments, like Home Affairs is wholly affected. The staff in Home Affairs is not regarded as cold phase of delivery, unfortunately.
And that's not the only challenge in as far as deportations are concerned. In the year 2017, you spent about 28 million rand, I'm told, on vehicles to actually, because you need infrastructure to carry out a deportation, especially by ground transportation. So you spend some money on vehicles, but also you actually have to, you literally bear the costs of transporting a person from South Africa to another country, whether be it by air or by road or any other means.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've just given you a figure that in the past 5 years, the figure amounted to approximately 1 billion rand. Yes, because you deport them by air, you deport them by road, you must hire buses. It's estimated that in the past 5 years, the department might have utilized 2,500 buses in deportation when you look at the numbers. Yes.
So in the mix there, we throw in Lindela Repatriation Center and the company that has been that has had a contract there to run that repatriation center is the one formerly known as Bosasa Africa Global Operations. We know about the issues that have come up around them at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry and the kind of focus that they've since been under since then. How has that affected what happens at Lindela? What can you say, taking South Africa into your confidence right now? What is the status of those people who are at Lindela right now? Who's servicing them? Who's serving and ensuring that their welfare and their human rights are looked after?
That's indeed true what you have said. The African Global Network, or BOSASA, is the company that owns Lindela. And it's the company that Home Affairs gave a contract to manage the place, management of the place, prepare food and all that. Now, you are aware that after this story of Bosasa broke out in the Zondo Commission, many departments canceled the contract, starting especially correctional services, because that was the biggest contract. Unfortunately, Home Affairs cannot, because if we do that immediately, it means we'll abandon the people who are there at Lindela. It has got a capacity of about 4,000 migrants who must be deported. Otherwise, they'll be left in the lurch, and we can't do that. But at the present moment, remember that the company had applied for business rescue, and there's an administrator there because he's being sequestrated or something like that. And so the person we have got a contract with is no longer the original company. It is the administrator. Yes. What do they call them? The people who sequestrate businesses.
Yeah, business rescue practitioners, I think.
Yeah, the business rescue practitioner.
Depending on what the process is.
Yes, the business rescue practitioner is now the one who has taken over. And we are now talking and paying that one. In other words, we are now contracted to that business rescue practitioner. But remember that the company did go to court to try and reverse the fact that they have applied for business rescue. And they've been granted. So at the moment, we are still in limbo. In other words, the Department of Home Affairs is hanging in the middle.
But do you want to continue to be in a business relationship with this company, Africa Global Operations?
Well, look, the best thing is for the government to own Lindela. And we've asked the Department of Public Works to look at the possibility of purchasing that. And we issue another contract for somebody who will manage the place. We have even gone to the Department of Correctional Services to ask if there's a possibility of them giving us an old disused correctional service facility, what you used to call jails, if they are available, if there's a correctional service facility that can be used, or an old army barracks from the army. We couldn't find any of those. We couldn't find any of those, and the process is still on. We wouldn't like to be in limbo for that long for this type of operation.
Capacity of some 4,000 at Lindela. Where do we stand at the moment? What are your officials telling you? Are we below capacity, at capacity, over capacity?
Well,
what are the conditions?
No, I'm talking about the maximum capacity of what it could carry. But at the last count, and I think it's 24 hours ago when I was told, there were 900 people.
All right. So let me bring it back then to this issue of deportations, Minister, as I conclude. I don't believe I got a straight answer from you about where do we stand on deportations. They were up from around 2008, thereabouts, and started going down. By 2010, we were talking, minimal numbers in as far as deportations are concerned. What is your target? Are you upping the number of deportations now in line with what the ANC said in its manifesto? In fact, all the political parties, many of them actually, had that in common, that they would want to focus on irregular migration.
Well, Thulasizwe, we decide that we must deport whoever is undocumented as soon as they've gone through the processes. That's our position. That has never changed. It's still going on. Now, there are quite a number of factors that will determine how many people we deport. It's not like you have got a specific pool of people sitting somewhere and you say, every day I'll deport this many. It depends on objective conditions. Number one, how many cases have gone through the courts? Number two, what transportation do we have at that point in time? Number three, you don't just deport people, by the way. You have got to discuss with their embassies.
Yeah, which
they must come
comes
there.
with its own difficulties.
Yes, they must come there and say, yes, this is our nationals. In fact, there was a time, I'm told, I was not there in Home Affairs, where Home Affairs chartered a plane to deport people to the DRC. When they arrived there, the government refused to allow them and said, no, we're not accepting them.
Minister, thank you so much for coming through. I'm completely out of time. There's so much that we could have continued to talk about, but we are out of time. That is the Minister of Home Affairs, that is Aaron Motsoaledi, discussing issues of migration with me here in the news feed. Stand by in just a moment. This Women's Day, we look at Tambo Scott, a 100% black female youth-owned law firm. I will be joined by co-founder and chairwoman Deborah Mutemwa in just a moment.